FM News Talk 97.1. On-demand audio.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored, pleased to have Congressman Ron Paul on the line with us. RonPaul2012.com. Candidate Ron Paul, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know you're getting ready for the caucuses. You know, I voted for you in the primary, my friend.
Oh, that's very nice.
Well, you know, listen, when I told my listeners, I said when I took the vote, it was a principled vote. I thought that this is a guy who, to me, is more in line with constitutional consistency than any of the other guys out there. And for you, what that means, essentially, and you're coming to town this weekend, and so it's going to be a big event this weekend, and we'll tell people more about that in just a few at Lindenwood College. But what you're saying right now is some people think it would be hard to return to the days of our founding fathers and constitutional principles, but you don't see any problem with that.
Well, you know, I don't use the return. I want to pick up where we left off. Because I think the people who keep saying that we are going back to the dark ages of the 18th, 19th century, I'm saying those who want big government are going back to the dark ages of tyranny. You know, that's the way most of the world has always been run and even is run today, where this example we had of much more individual liberty and the prosperity that we had in our early years, This to me is new and different and an experiment that we've rejected. So even the gold standard, I want a gold standard, I want to obey the Constitution. But the gold standard was not perfect even back in the 19th century. It had some flaws. So I think you go back and find out what commodities money is about and actually improve upon it and move to the next stage. Unfortunately, in the last 100 years, I see that we've slipped away from this very, very wonderful experiment we've had in this country where we emphasize individual liberty.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of corrected me on the whole return to, because you don't want to technically that's not really what's happening here, and I think that it's what we have is already there. We just simply have to be able to utilize what's already in front of us. Now, as it relates to taxation, what kind of taxing system, income tax, that kind of thing, do you have in mind?
Of course, you know, it depends on the stage of where we are in restoring a republic. You know, the republic, when it was given to us, we didn't have an income tax. That only came about 100 years ago, and then big government flourished after that. You had the welfare state and this worldwide military intervention as a consequence of both the Fed and the taxing system. So if you can return to a proper-sized government, you don't need the income tax, and, of course, that would be my goal. In between, I have always promised my constituents I would never vote for a tax increase. I would always vote for a tax decrease, and I would always vote to reduce the power of the IRS. So in the meantime, you know, I do whatever I can to lower taxes. But I think the biggest problem is the spending and the role of government rather than just the collection of taxes. The collection of the taxes and the type of tax we have is a result of people endorsing this entitlement system that now is totally bankrupt and is no longer viable.
Yeah, you know, I've said before, and I know that you're not going this far, but I've always said, you know, we ought to repeal the 16th and get back to where the states are the one collecting the taxes.
I agree with you.
Oh, you do? Okay, yeah, okay.
Sure.
I mean, honestly, that's because what's happened is ever since we actually generated the income tax, politicians have used that money collected to essentially in a massive vote-buying scheme, really, is what it is, and so that's why you have all these big programs now.
And that's why the lobbyists have taken over, because the government was the redistributor. And then it goes one step further. They tax and they control the taxing authority, but that's never enough. And then they had to do a lot of borrowing, and that wasn't enough. So they said, well, we'll play another game. If we come up short and we can't borrow or interest rates will go up, we'll just keep printing the money. And they did it, and they got away with it for a long time. And we've essentially been doing that since 1971. But, you know, in the last few years, it's pretty evident to the whole world when you think how many times a week they change the plans on bailing out Greece, you know.
Yeah.
So it is a worldwide crisis of debt. We're all involved in it, but we're more responsible from the rest because we were privileged to print the reserve currency. The dollar serves as the gold, and yet it has no backing, and it's all a gross distortion of overspending and massive amount of debt accumulation.
Ron Paul will be at Lindenwood University at 3 o'clock tomorrow. It's the Highland Arena on the St. Charles campus right there on South Kings Highway in St. Charles. Admission is free, and seating is coming at the first-come, first-served level. RonPaul2012.com is where you can find out even more about that and just about where Congressman Paul stands on the myriad of issues. And one thing I do have to tell you, though, when we talk about Ron Paul on this radio show, and you have a lot of supporters who listen to this show, when we talk about it, everybody says, yeah, the only thing I disagree with him on is his stance on foreign policy, and I think a lot of people are think. And I've vetted this because somebody directed me to some video that explains your foreign policy viewpoints. But a lot of people think that you have stated before that somehow 9/11 was our fault, that we actually brought it on. And so there are people who have issues with the foreign policy component of the Ron Paul. Can you right the ship on this level for us?
Yeah, well, we were told, and still the majority of people believe, and this is where the confusion comes, believe that Muslims are by nature hateful and want to destroy America because we're rich and free. And I don't believe that. I think that was the excuse. I do believe it was blowback. The CIA has written about it. The Department of Defense has written about it. Even Paul Wolfowitz, who was the biggest champion of this war, said that, if we had not built that air base in Saudi Arabia, it wouldn't have incited the Al-Qaeda. Even the 9/11 Commission acknowledged that our bases, in the Middle East and our occupation and our propping up of dictators motivates the radicalization of some of the Muslims. And I believe that is the number one reason why there's a desire to come and kill us.
Now, when it comes to future situations, obviously, when we look at our involvement with Egypt, our involvement in Libya, and now some people, even John McCain, talking about an involvement in Syria, which is inexplicable to me in this time, and then possibly an involvement in Iran, all this stuff. That's where I think a lot of us are with you. Because at some point, it's not because of fatigue from Afghanistan or Iraq. It's just at some point this is about going back to what the federal government and our military is tasked to do according to the Constitution, and that is defend our national security, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, not to be the policeman of the world. I argue this from a moral viewpoint, that we don't have the moral authority to impose our will, even though some people would say it's well motivated and they need our influence. But also the Constitution doesn't give us this authority to get involved, and the founders were very adamant, don't get involved in the internal affairs of other nations, trade with them, be friends with them, but don't try to force our views on others. And I think the eventual reason why this will end will be economic, just as the Soviet system didn't come down because we fought a nuclear war with them. They came down for economic reasons. They overextended themselves, and ironically in Afghanistan, which finally brought them down. So economically, we can't afford this. We're running, last February was the largest increase in our national debt in our history in 1 month. So nothing is coming under control. There is no serious effort to cut anything. And this is why part of my platform is, yes, it's a spending problem. I would cut $1 trillion out of the budget first year.
When it comes to your campaign, and some people are wondering why perhaps you haven't done better, like, for instance, if we take Super Tuesday as an example, and we've talked about the caucuses, and I know you guys know how to work the caucuses very well, but why do you think, for instance, listen, the polling, I've seen the latest Rasmussen poll a while back showed you and Mitt Romney beating Obama as the only two candidates beating Obama. Why do you think that hasn't translated to more state victories?
Well, the biggest challenges in the Republican primary, and it is true right now, they just did one up in Maine, and I do a lot better than Romney running against Obama, because the principles of liberty in the Constitution, civil liberties and anti-war, these things are very appealing to independents and a lot of Democrats. So it's very natural. Now, Republicans have never concerned themselves so much about privacy. They're super supportive of the Patriot Act, and they don't complain about the president announcing that we can assassinate American citizens now and use the military to arrest citizens and hold them indefinitely. that's not what they're interested in. But I think some of the enthusiasm, sometimes we'll get out, 4,000 and 5,000 people, but there'll be young people, some won't even be 18, and some love what I'm saying but aren't motivated to vote. And also, out of fairness, people should look carefully at some of how this vote counting has occurred. There's been some that the stories are pretty outrageous about exactly how this vote counting goes. But if you say too much of that, then they say you're just a sore loser and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because we have double-checked things, and the numbers don't always add up.
Well, and you know what? We just say no matter what happens, I've told people that Ron Paul will be a presence in Tampa no matter what happens. And I guess, but that's not to insinuate somehow that you're not in this to win it.
No, because if you were doing that, the enthusiasm wouldn't be there, the fundraising wouldn't be there. So you have to set that goal. You're always in a race to win. And you don't know what the future will bring. Just think about how many people have been up in first place and then down rather sharply. So something like that could happen. So we'll be ready and raring to go when it's our turn.
All right, Congressman Ron Paul, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow at Lindenwood University in St. Charles at 3 o'clock, folks. Admission is free, obviously. First come, first serve there at the Highland Arena. And Godspeed to you, and good luck to you, Congressman Paul, and I appreciate you joining us for as long as you're able to.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right, that's Congressman Ron Paul, ronpaul2012.com. Nice guy, isn't he?
Very nice.
Well, it was so funny when I said when I talked about the 16th Amendment. He goes, "Yeah." He's like wondering. I wonder if sometimes it surprises him that certain people support him. Because I think he gets a lot of people in his face. In our business, because they always want to harp on him about the foreign policy thing in Iran and that kind of thing, and they make him out to be a goofball. But I don't know. I really like him. I like what he stands for. I know I've said earlier that, you know what, I'm afraid he's too old or what have you, and that's true. I mean, you always have that in the back of your mind, but I think he's chipper enough, don't you?
I think so.